Hello, everybody, and welcome to tonight's webinar. I'm so thrilled that you could be here with us. My name is Sam Anderson. I have been a C2 teacher trainer for the last couple of years, and before that I was a teacher teaching many students, many exams, including most of the ones that we're going to be talking here tonight. I taught hundreds of students over 9.5 years, and APs are a personal favorite of mine. I always feel that they're one of the most influential tests that a lot of students take. They're becoming more and more important as more and more students take them. So I'm really happy to be here and talk with you all about them. So tonight we're going to focus a lot more on the humanities exams, the histories, the English, a little bit of government and politics. Now, sort of quickly gone through, we're going to sort of look at a couple major aspects. We're going to take a look at the APs as a whole. Then we're going to look through each of the exams we talked about, AP Lang and Composition, AP Literature and Composition, AP US Government and Politics, AP US History, AP European History, and AP World History. We're going to take a look at the format, the question types, and then some of the content as well. Then after that, we're going to take a bit of a look at some of the strategies. How do you handle multiple choice? How do you handle essays? How do you handle, shorter response questions? Then at the end, we're going to take a quick run through some good study plans. How can you study, use the time that remains before the AP exams, and really effectively use that time so that you can get the best possible score, the most bang for your buck, etc. So let's talk about the APs. APs are designed to be a 1 or 2 semester exam depending on the course, right? So depending on what course you take, they are designed to model a 1 or 2 semester college level course. Now, overall, there are 38 AP courses in 7 different subject areas. There's English, social sciences, art, foreign language, math and computer science, science, and then interdisciplinary. Now, we're only going to be talking about, again, really the humanities and the English today, but each course, all 38 of them, have a corresponding AP exam that occurs in May. Whether it be computer science, whether it be English, whether it be history, there's always an exam. Now, why do we take these? Why do we want to take these? Now, many sites, College Navigator, College Data, many college counselors have admitted that the top 3 factors that they all look at are the GPA, and not just the GPA overall, not just the GPA across all of your classes, but specifically the GPA in your college level classes, in the APs, in the highest level classes you possibly take. And then they also look at the overall strength of curriculum. How many honors classes, how many AP classes, how many high level classes are you taking compared to what is actually offered in your school? And that information is all public, so they can tell that. But they're really important to make sure that you have a really strong curriculum and you have really strong grades in all of your classes. So you want to make sure you get into the most challenging classes that you're offered. Now, that means you want to take as many as you do well in, right? Now, if you can't handle 5 or 6 AP classes and still get A's and still get your best possible scores, then you shouldn't take 5 or 6. You should take as many as you feel that you can actually succeed in. If that's 2, then that's 2. If that's 3, that's 3. If that's more, awesome, great. But you should really aim to take the ones that you can do the best that you possibly can in, instead of worrying about just the pure numbers, because it's going to matter a lot what your grades are. Again, the grades in your classes is still ranked higher than the number of classes that you're taking, because they want to see yourself, colleges want to see yourself pushing academically, right? They want to see that you are struggling, that you are challenging, that you are pushing yourself, because they want to know what kind of student you're going to be when you get into college. And your job as a student is to learn. Your job as a student is to grow, to soak up as much knowledge as you possibly can. And colleges want to see that the person you are in high school is a person that they're going to want to see in college, so that you're, thirsty for knowledge in high school, so that you'll be thirsty for knowledge in college. And that's what they're looking for. So the benefits to the APs, besides all the college, is that you can earn college credit. Good scores, besides looking really impressive to colleges, can give you college credit or advance you in the course. There's usually 3 possible options that schools allow. 1 is they allow you to pass out of the course, meaning you can go into a higher level course, but you don't get credit. 2 is that they give you credit, but they still want you to take that introductory level course. The credit would go in more as like an elective. And 3 is they give you both credit and allow you to pass out of the course. So regardless, taking the AP exam saves you time, it saves you money. For all you parents out there, it saves you money in college. I know someone who was able to use their AP credits and get a whole year of college credit under her belt. And so it can really save a lot of time and a lot of money. And then, for students, instead of having to go through those introductory level courses, that you can get to the more advanced, the more interesting, the more enjoyable classes much earlier in your college career, so that freshman year isn't just getting all those prereqs out of the way. Now, in order to get that college credit, usually you need a good score. You need either a 4 or a 5, sometimes a 3. Most top schools want a 4 or 5. The really top schools only want a 5. Now, every school has a different credit policy. They all have different policies. They all have, they will accept different tests with different scores for different number of credits for different prereqs. Every school is different. But regardless, you can always go, if you go to College Board's website, there is a place that says, AP Credit Locator. You just type in the college's name and you can just look up their credits. So it's a great thing to have, really good, really useful for getting into college. Now, in order to do that, obviously you have to ace the exams. Now, the exams are long. These are like your SATs, they're like your ACTs. They run 3 hours around. Some of them are a little shorter. Some of them are maybe a couple of minutes longer. Every AP exam is scored from 1 to 5. 5 is the top score, 1 is the lowest score. Each exam, for the most part, has a combination of multiple choice and free response sections that usually are weighted directly. So, sometimes for some exam, maybe the multiple choice is weighted a little higher, the free response a little lower, and for other exams, it might be the other way around. Regardless, there's a weighted combination of those 2 exams, and most important, for all the free response questions, and I cannot stress this enough, we're going to talk about this a lot moving forward, there is partial credit. Multiple choice is right and wrong, right? You get it or you don't get it. The free response, FRQs, even essays, even the essays in English and history, they give partial credit for correct information. For partial answers, for processes. If you have certain words or phrases that they are looking for, you will get partial credit, even if you don't get everything right. So, the way the scoring of all of this works is you start at a 0 and then you gain points based on the information that you put in. So you want to make sure that no matter what happens, that you are answering every question in as much detail as possible. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. So, the actual exams. Language. Let's talk about language first. So, language got 2 parts. At multiple choice and a free response. Obviously, because it's an English exam, the free response, which includes essays, is weighted a little bit higher. Multiple choice, you've got about 50 to 55 questions, takes about an hour. It's 4 passages, about 13 questions per passage. Versus the free response is essays. One is a synthesis essay. Synthesis essay is a document-based essay. They give you a bunch of documents. They want you to form an argument. They have rhetorical analysis, which is very similar to those of you who have taken the SAT to the SAT essay. And the last one is a persuasive argument essay, one where you're putting forth your own idea and then arguing on it. Now, the literature exam. So that's the English language exam. The literature exam, same breakdown. 45% of the test is the multiple choice. 55% is the essays. Same times. 1 hour for the multiple choice, 2 hours for the essays. Essays are different though. One is literary analysis of a poem, right? For those of you who haven't really read a lot of poetry, there is poetry in the literature exam. If you didn't like it, if you took it, if you're taking literature and you're not a big fan of the poetry, you're going to need to brush up on it. Other one, literary analysis of a prose fiction, which could be an excerpt from a play. And the last one of the most challenging essays there is an essay that requires you to pull from a reading you have read in school and write an essay using it. So it requires you to have actually read the books in school, which can be, for those of you who maybe haven't read books recently or, don't read as much as you should, that's something you might want to brush up on. Now, usually they give you a sampling of different texts to pull from, but they do expect you to pull outside information in for that text. Now, those are the Englishes. Let's take a look at government and politics. Then we're going to get into the histories. Government and politics, pretty straightforward. There are 2 parts, section 1, and we'll talk about section 2 in a bit. Section 1 is 55 questions in a little bit over an hour, and it's 50%. Now, there are 6 basic skills that the government politics exam is covering. One is quantitative analysis. One, basically, they're giving you charts and graphs, and they are asking you to analyze the data. One is qualitative, right? They're giving you text. They're, an excerpt from a Supreme Court opinion, part of the Constitution, and they want you to analyze those. They give you pictures and diagrams, political cartoons, ask you to analyze those. And then just general concept application. Comparison, right? Comparing multiple things, and then just pure knowing stuff, right? The sort of pure rote memorization. So if you think about it, it's really 5 categories of application analysis and only 1 category of distinct memorize everything. And that's going to be very common around all these APs. The APs are getting more and more conceptual and not so much just focusing on, do you remember everything there is to know about the Constitution? Do you remember everything there is to know about, European history? They're becoming much more conceptual, much more analytical. That's starting to show, and it's starting to show in the skills that come up. Now the free response questions are pretty straightforward. Again, get a little bit closer to 2 hours the time. Again, 50%, 4 questions, 4 distinct types of questions. One is a concept application, one is quantitative, one is a comparison of Supreme Court decisions, and the last one is a pure argumentative essay. These are going to be long responses, and remember, partial credit is going to be given. So that's the basic exam. Now, the entire course, though, revolves around really 5 particular topics. One is obviously the Constitution, right? This is AP government, and so the Constitution is going to be in it. So the Constitution establishes a system of checks, and then the government sort of it's allocated between the government. That's one major idea, and how everything ties back to the Constitution. Liberty and order, right? Laws balancing, are based and then are interpreted, right? How people interpret laws changes over time, right? How Ronald Reagan interpreted a series of laws can be very different than, let's say, how Bill Clinton, Barack Obama interpreted a series of laws. And so you want to understand sort of the connections between those. Civic participation, right? The ability of how citizens engage in the political process. Political movements, political thought, political ideas. That's all part of this, process. Competing policymaking interest, right? Republican versus Democrat being the sort of 2 basic concepts, but, independent party groups, lobbyists, etc. Methods of political analysis, right? Using charts, data, how all that sort of connects into understanding and analyzing governmental and political decisions. That's your really basic big ideas of government. And those 5 big ideas really sort of form the basis of the entire thing and are what are going to be tested on the test. So if you're feeling a little weak on one of them, make sure you get some prep in. Now, histories. The histories are all basically using the same 4 skills, right? So whether it's US history, European history, world history, all of them use the same 4 basic skills, which makes life a little easier because there's a lot of crossover between them. One is context, right? Understanding historical context. Now, one of the big things in the history exam is that everything is based on documents. And so because everything is based on documents, understanding the context of those documents is incredibly important. And so you want to make sure you understand sort of what goes in behind the various documents and not just reading the documents at face value. Along with that, obviously, is comparison, right? Taking multiple documents, multiple political sets of thought, multiple, areas and time periods and comparing them. And how do they, the similarities, the differences, working between those. Alongside of that, right? It's a lot of C's if you look at it, right? There's context, comparison, causation, right? Understanding what causes what, right? That's sort of, in many ways, right, the best way of looking at sort of history over time, right? Looking at, okay, this event or this idea caused that event. Short-term, long-term events, looking at the historical significance of thing. But one of the reasons why that is such an important skill is because it lends into really one of the bigger skills, which is this continuity and change over time. How do developments, how does history change over time? Historical thought, historical ideas, political movements, how do they change over time and what stays the same? We're going to talk about that a lot in a little while. So those are your 4 basic skills in the histories, the 4 C's, however you want to call them. These are the 4 major things you need to be able to do regardless of what history that you're taking. Now, US history, almost all of them have the same exam format, so I'm just going to run through these really quickly. The 55-minute, 55-question multiple choice. Again, it is document based, so it's sets of 2 and 5. Historical text. Then there's a short answer, which is 3 questions. It's 2 required questions. Then the last one is a choice of 2. 20%, 40 minutes. Then part 2, right? Section 2 are your essays. 1 is the document-based question. This sort of curse for many students, right? You get a bunch of documents, you have to analyze them and develop an argument. And the last is the long essay. The long essay in history is usually based around that continuity and change. Sometimes there's a couple others, but it's usually based in that or in the comparisons. It's an argument supported by historical evidence. Now, you get 3 options for the long essay. And those 3 options each focus on a different time period. So now the time periods. There are 9 time periods in the United States, right? With the change in the recent years, one of the things that they did is they really expanded out period 1 and period 9. Period 1 and period 9 really didn't used to exist before the change. Now they're actually noticeable. They're right. They make up 10% of the exam in the course. Now, for those 3 prompts, 1 is going to be from periods 1 to 3. One of those prompts for the long response is going to be from periods 4 to 6, and the last one's going to be from periods 7 to 9. So if there's an area that you are stronger with, that's something you might want to look at. But regardless, the DBQ, the document-based question, is always going to be based from periods 3 to 8, right? So really you want to make sure that if you're really, honing in and focusing, that you want to make sure you get all of this, but periods 3 to 8 are really the meat of a lot of the questions, a lot of the concepts. Now, it's also important to know that the short responses, though, runs from period 1 to 6. So they're a little bit earlier on in the time period. So you can't ignore periods 1 and 2, the early periods, because there's still going to be a large chunk of the exam that's based on that. That's US history. European history, again, the same structure, right? 55 things, document-based, multiple choice, again, 3 options in a different time period. The difference is, though, the time periods in European history are different. Right? There's only 4. Everyone's about 25% of the test. Now, the DBQ for European history, the DBQ is explicitly stated to be from about 1600 to the present time. But, the short responses could be, again, there's 1 in the early, 1 in the middle, and 1 in the late, just like before. Just like with the US, right? So you again want to make sure that you're sort of covering all these, but this one, unlike the US history, it doesn't have those sort of beginning and end that are of, not less important, but lower percentages of the course and the test of the time. Ironically, usually lower percentages of the course and test mean that actually they require a bit more studying. Because usually a little bit less time is spent on them in school, and if you're aiming for that high score, you want to have it. But for European history, everything has an equal weight, so there is no sort of topic or area or time period in the European history course that you can be like, you know what, I'm gonna come back to this later, I'm gonna put this aside. It's all important and it's all equally so. So world history, again, same structure, 55 questions, short response, again, the same, 2 required, 1, sorry about that, pop it up. 2 required, 1 short response. Now, document, again, same thing, 1 60-minute, 25%, 1 long, 3 things. But 6 periods this time around. Now, these ones are not so like period 1, period 2, so on and so forth. They're based more around themes, right? What are the themes of the test? Now, as you can see, right, that early part is, again, a relatively low percentage. Again, it's still equally important. The free response in this case is going to be a little bit different. The free, the document is going to be, from a large chunk of it. They're going to, again, sort of pull from that period 2, for lack of a better word, on. Short response is, again, going to be sort of 1 from the early, 1 from the middle, 1 from the late. Now, here, as you can see, there is a, really a larger focus on the sort of, the common error, as it's called, right? There's a larger focus on things that are happened once the common error starts. Large chunk of that is obviously because we have more documentary evidence. And again, this is all document-based questions, so it's a lot easier to find documents, especially primary documents on material, in the common error, because there's just, more documents more writings around. That being said, though, again, you don't want to ignore, because there are still going to be questions. There are going to be multiple choice questions. There are going to be short response. Again, is going to be on the earlier side versus the long response, the DBQs, on the later end of the curriculum. So you want to make sure that you're still covering all of it and not just neglecting one part because you think, oh, it's not going to be on the DBQ. No, you want to make sure you cover it all. So let's actually talk about how to handle some of these particular strategies, some of these particular types of questions. Multiple choice, right? Every test has multiple choice. Every test that you've ever most of the tests you've probably taken in school have some form of multiple choice, the SAT, the ACT, any of those tests, multiple choice. So first things first, and I cannot stress this enough, make sure you use all the information given. One of the biggest mistakes, one of the challenges that especially in more complex questions, a lot of students, they see a question and they say, okay, what's the answer? You don't want to always think about what's the answer. You want to always think about, okay, what information can I find? What information is it that I am able to figure out, that I'm able to find? And that should be your first process. So use the information that they have and find more information. But these are timed tests. Keep in mind that there is no guessing penalty on any AP test in the multiple choice or any part of the test whatsoever. There is no guessing penalty. You do not lose points if you get a question wrong. So when you see a question and you're like, can I do this, right? Decide, hey, I can do this. I'm going to get it right and do it right away. Say, you know what? I'm going to come back to this if I have a bit more time, mark it to return. Or if you're just like, I have no idea whatsoever, guess right away. Don't wait. Spend your time on the questions that you can do rather than those that you're just like scratching your head over. Now, again, no guessing penalty. That means answer everything. Answer every single question. There should be no blanks if you find yourself running out of time. And I highly recommend that you all bring a watch with you to your exam, right? Don't rely on your phone because they will probably take it away. You'll be forced to put it away. Bring a watch. Position yourself so that you can see the clock and keep track of how much time you have. And if you feel like you're running out of time, make sure you go through your multiple choice questions and you answer every single question, whether you guess C, whether you guess A, whether you decide to make a pattern with the numbers, whether you spell out your name, if you can, make sure that you answer every single question. Now, when you're home, when you're practicing, when you're preparing for these tests, you have to remember that they are timed. And so you want to make sure that when you're practicing with multiple choice that you don't give yourself infinite time. It's really easy to sit there on multiple choice and, just say, okay, I'm going to practice. I'm just going to do the questions. How many do I get right? So on and so forth. But remember, this is a timed test, so make sure you're practicing under timed condition. Now, that doesn't mean you have to necessarily practice under the exact time conditions of the test, right? 55 minutes for that multiple choice or 60 if it's one of the English. And make sure you practice under some form of time condition because it's going to give you a little bit of that anxiety, a little bit of that, oh, okay, I got to make sure, I'm on track and pace it, right? You want to make sure you're pacing so that when you come to the test, when it gets time to take the test or in this session, you are not sort of like, oh my God, I've never felt this before. What is this? No, make sure you're practicing and is realistic. And again, we're going to talk about that in a bit. Now, the short response question. Now, these members are on the history exams primarily. Make sure you're aiming for about roughly a paragraph per answer. They will give you space. They do require you to bring in outside information, so that means you have to make sure you are answering the question directly. Don't just start spouting off about random, historical details that you remember. Make sure you're answering what the question's asking directly. Is the fastest way to lose points. And again, remember that there is partial credit. So therefore, it's all in the details. The more specific, the more details you can get, provided you're still actually answering the question, the better it's going to be for you. So if that means you need to spend a couple times, right, you're going to have a decent chunk of time to do really 3 short response questions, right? You're going to have 40 minutes to do 3 short response questions. So make sure you spend some time if you have to saying, okay, for question 1, oh, okay, I remember this particular area. I remember this. Before you start writing, jot down some areas, right? Do a little outlining. You'll have the time. But again, they're going to be sort of multi-part short. So there might be a part A and a part B. Make sure you format, make sure you separate them. It's not just this one long word, soup out there that the graders still have to go through. Now, they will go through it, but you want to make it as easy as possible on the grader. Remember, on these tests, you start from 0 points on your responses, and you gain points when they find the information that they are being told to look for, and that's on scoring guidelines that they're given. You can find sample scoring guidelines on the College Board website. So you want to make sure you format, separate, organize your answers so that your grader can get through them as fast as possible. And I'm going to say this now, and I'm going to say this for the DBQ and for the long response and every essay you ever write, and I cannot stress this enough. Make sure you write neatly. Again, make it as easy on your grader as possible. Write in neat handwriting, write as clean as possible. Don't chicken scratch, scribble scrawl. Your graders need to be able to read what you're saying. So, the long form, the long free response question, whether these be the English essay, whether they be the sort of other, the second long response for the history, or any of the responses for the government, right? So first and foremost, read through the whole question first. A lot of times these questions are like a paragraph long. They give some instructions. Make sure you read the whole part. Make sure you read every aspect. For a lot of questions, even the long responses, especially in government, there is multiple parts to it. There is, a part A and a part B and a part C. Make sure you do them in order. A lot of times later parts are going to be based on information you provide in the previous part. Now, keep in mind, as long as your answers are consistent with what you say in earlier parts, so let's say part C relies on part A, but you've got something wrong on part A, as long as part C effectively utilizes or effectively relies on what you said in part A, they will still give you credit for part C. You will not get the credit for part A, but you will get it for part C. So make sure you do them in order, because it is going to matter. You are going to need information from earlier parts to do the later parts. So do them in order. And again, remember, they are looking for specific words, whether it be in a DBQ, whether it be in your English, rhetorical analysis question, whether it be in the US government. They are looking for specific pieces of information, for specific aspects of your essay. And so as long as you have that aspect, you will get points. And so you have to make sure that you have it. You have to make sure that you have as much answer and you're not just simply repeating information or repeating the question over and over and over again. You want to make sure you put as much detail, as much information as you possibly can in every single essay you write. But again, you still want to make sense. You want to, be cohesive and coherent, but you want jam-packed with as much detail. So make sure that you spend some time doing some outlining. Make sure that you spend time, coalescing your thoughts. A lot of them will give you a short reading period, some time where you have, especially for the DBQs, you'll have a little bit of time, usually it's about 15 minutes, to read through before you can start writing. Make sure you use it. Now, especially in like government, especially in history, make sure you're using as specific a term as possible, right? If they are, talking about carpetbaggers and Reconstruction, actually use the term carpetbaggers. Don't say the northern businessmen who came down to the South to, make a lot of money. Use the term, use the precise term as you can. Because again, maybe that one term, that's going to be the clue that they're looking for. Maybe that's going to be what is in their scoring guidelines that's going to give you that point. That is what happens. A lot of times, very specific terms will be in those scoring guidelines, especially, U.S. government and politics. They tell you to use a particular court case. What is the main opinion that came out of that court case? Again, be as specific as possible. And I know so many students, right? They write their essay and they're just done with writing their essay and they just don't want to do anything with it anymore. But make sure you revise and review your work. Grammar, spelling, all of that. That is going to, sometimes it's a point. Sometimes it's a point just for how well written the essay is. And so you want to make sure that you are lacking spelling errors. You are lacking errors in grammar and punctuation, especially those that affect the actual content, affect the reader's ability to understand what you're writing. You want to make sure that none of that is around. Make sure you review, make sure that you, again, have a clock, have a watch, make sure you're in there. Make sure you try to finish up 5 minutes ahead of time so you have the time to review and revise your work and edit. Check. Now, the DBQ. Again, you have a DBQ in all the histories, you have a DBQ in the English language. All of them, first and foremost, read every single document. Don't be, there's sometimes a lot of documents, right? 7, 8, 9, 10 documents. Make sure you're reading them. Take notes on them. What is this used for? Again, going back to that context, that contextualization. What is the context, the time period? Are there any events that they're referring to? Any specific thoughts that came to your mind when you read it? Any, if it's one of the history DBQs, are there any particular events that the speaker or writer is talking about? Or the political ideas that came about. So annotate, write notes in the margin. There'll be a lot of space around these documents. Use it. As you go through it, classify, right? A lot of times, a lot of the documents will sort of fit into groups that are connected, and make sure that as you're going through it, as you're reading it all, you're saying, okay, hey, document 6, oh, that's very similar to document 1. I'm going to write a little note down there on the bottom. And, because of that, because you're usually talking about a singular idea or topic, a lot of these documents fit into more than one group. That's not only okay, that's awesome, right? The more you can utilize the documents, the more sort of detailed and thorough your essay is going to be. So use every single one of the documents. That is actually a point on the history exams. There is a point on the history exams for using all or all but one of your documents. So make sure you use every single one of your documents, even if they're fitting in more than one group, even if you have to use a groups. Now, in order to make sure that you use all of those documents, as you're grouping them, make sure that you're sort of keeping track of which ones are making the strongest points, which ones are giving you the most information, which ones do you feel the strongest about, which ones do you have the most to say, which one can you pull the most outside information in. So make sure when you're grouping those, you're keeping track of all that, because you really want to make sure that you take your 3, 4 best groups, not documents, groups of documents, and use those as the themes of your body paragraph. Because you want to make sure that, again, you are not only able to analyze the documents, but you're also able to analyze the context and the events around it. There are distinct points, especially on the history DBQs, for analyzing the documents in context of the history and pulling outside information, right? You're going to need outside information for these, and you're going to need to make a thesis. That is another point. There's a point on every single one of these deep document-based questions. Having a distinct point, having a position, having a thought, not just you're not just telling history using the documents. What is the purpose? What is your position on the question? And make sure you have a position, and make sure that is what you are answering. So there's a lot of stuff, right? We want to have 4 different question types, tons of exams. There's only so much time until those AP exams. So how do we go about doing that? How do we go about preparing? How do we go about setting ourselves up so that we are in the best possible shape when it comes to those exams? 1, start early. Right? These courses are lasting the whole year. So the best thing that you can do is you want to make sure you're keeping up with your class all year. You're doing all your homework, you're studying for the exams. When I say studying for the exams, I do not mean just the night before. Start like a week before, start a couple weeks before, review your notes every day, take the notes that you get from school, go home, make notes, annotate those notes. Really make sure that you're sort of keeping up, that you're doing the most that you can for the school class itself, and that'll do a good job of setting you up. But that's not everything, right? That's not everything you need to do, right? A lot of times, everything in school, especially, right? Again, these classes are year long. A lot of times, we don't remember stuff from the beginning of the year, right? September, oh my God, I can't remember what I was doing in September. I don't know about you. I don't know what I was doing in September or October, right? I can't tell you, a particular class or student that I taught. No. So sometimes we need to come in to review, right? But regardless, you want to start at the latest in March. That's the latest. January is good, February is good, December is awesome, but start at the latest March. Now, the first thing to do when you're preparing, the first thing to absolutely do when you're preparing is to make sure you have a plan. A lot of times, right, we sort of think through our plans and we say, okay, I've got this deadline, it's then, I've got to get all these things, I've got to get A, B, C, D, so on and so forth, done by that deadline. Make sure that when you're setting up your plan, you're setting up not only what you're going to do every day to help you get towards that goal, but what the sort of check marks are per week, right? Because stuff comes up, right? Things come up that you don't expect, right? Maybe a school event, an emergency, maybe your teacher gave you a ton of homework one night that you weren't expecting on. Things are going to come up. And so if you do everything by like what you're trying to do every day, that's going to sometimes be a problem. So make sure you have a weekly goal as well, and be specific in those goals, right? To say, oh, I want to, learn about periods 4, 5, and 6 in U.S. history. That's not very specific. What topic, right? Are you going to take a look at World War I? Are you going to look at the, home front of World War I? Or are you going to look at what's happening in Europe at that time? Right? What type of practice? You're going to be doing multiple choice. You're going to be doing short response. You're going to be analyzing documents, doing a practice DBQ, long response, literary analysis, watching films or videos. What are you going to be doing to help you get to that goal? Now, make sure that when you're setting up those goals that you're doing some, not only, very targeted review. Okay, I'm going to, look at all the laws of the New Deal. But you're also looking at some comprehensive. Okay, I'm going to do like some review questions on period 6, right? Something more comprehensive, something more general. Now, every class has a syllabus, a table of contents, there's a textbook. Use those to see everything you need to cover. There's also a course description that's available on College Board. Use all the resources available, whether it be your syllabus, whether it be the table of contents in your textbook or a prep book if you want to get a prep book. Use some sort of resource to help you along with this, to set up, okay, these are the things I need to do. Maybe go through that table of contents and mark everything between a 1 and a 5. 5, yeah, I know it. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be great. 1, I'm really weak on it. I don't remember anything about this topic, right? And make sure that you have that set up for every single thing. But make sure, again, that you build in some practice exams. Now, I cannot stress this enough. A lot of times students think, oh, I got to prepare for the exam. I'm just going to do practice test after practice test after practice test after practice test. That's not going to help. Maybe if you do 50 or 100 of them, then it may help. But 1 or 2, not going to help. Yeah, you're going to see the questions you get wrong, but you're not going to necessarily understand why you got them wrong. So you want to make sure you're building in review and material. Practice exams are great, but they're really good at seeing where you stand, not for improving. So use your practice exams to see how you're doing, what your progress is, where you stand, but don't just do practice problems and expect to learn material from those practice questions. Now, I talked earlier about the fact that, right, stuff comes up. Build in some flex time. Build in time for not only those crazy emergencies, but maybe something comes, you do a practice exam to see where you stand and you realize, oh my God, this topic that I thought I knew really well, I thought I knew everything about the Great Depression. I thought I remembered everything about the Great Depression, but I didn't, Maybe that 5 that I thought was the Great Depression, right? When I was going through my table of contents, I put a 5 next to the Great Depression. Maybe that's really a 3. Maybe I need to build in some practice. So that's going to happen. So make sure you build in some flex, some time to do some particular targeted review. So that's going to look something like this, right? So let's say week 4, right? 4 weeks from now, or maybe this is week 4 of your plan, right? You're taking a look, and now this is based on obviously AP Lit, or actually language, right? You're going to take a look. We're going to review metaphor and simile, okay? And we're going to review, what metaphors and simile, right? The language involved, those particular rhetorical devices. Then we're going to take a look at the Great Gatsby essays we read, earlier in the year, or I wrote earlier in the year. We're going to take a look through that. Then we're going to do some multiple choice, right? Some multiple choice questions. We're going to do a DBQ. We're going to do another free response. Maybe it'll be the rhetorical analysis, right? And then we're going to just outline a bunch of essays, right? We're not going to actually maybe write the essay. We're just going to work on our outlining skills. But again, it's targeted, right? So very targeted, right? We're going to look at metaphor and simile. But again, there is some general, right? Some multiple choice, some outlining of free response. So there's a mix of, again, that targeted and that comprehensive. And you want to make sure that you have both. Now, as you get closer to the exam, obviously, you're going to build in more full-length practice, right? You're going to build in timed, right? Because again, we want to be working as if it's the actual exam. So we're going to build in full-length timed practice tests. Then, right, we're going to be able to take a look, right? We're going to, give them to somebody. Maybe somebody else is going to grade them, right? We're going to give, we're going to write an essay. We're going to give the essay to a friend or a family member or your teacher or a mentor, a tutor, anybody, right? And said, okay, here, I wrote this essay. Can you grade it according to scoring guidelines? And maybe they're going to say, hey, you're really struggling with your rhetorical devices. You're really struggling with your use of irony or, stronger language. So maybe at that point in time, you have to go back and you have to review a bit more about metaphors and simile, a bit more about, irony. And that's going to be part of that flex time, right? That sort of, okay, I'm going to build in a bit of, hey, I'll take what I can, I'll see what I draw at that point of time. or again, build in the time if need be to, like, maybe there's a study session with the friends, and it takes up a day, and that you had built into your plan, and you want to go because studying with other people is a great thing to do, by all means. So if you have a big study group on your AP language, and you build in that flex time, okay, that's the time that you can then use to go, study with your friends, provided you're actually studying and not just like chatting and chilling and having fun. Make sure you do build in some studying. Now, as I said before, regardless of what you plan, regardless of how you break down the plan, when you study, as I said before, right, and you saw it with the U.S. government, you saw it with the histories, all three, right, the U.S., European, world. These tests are getting more conceptual. These tests are becoming more about why things are happening, how things connect, how things apply, than it is just about memorizing court cases or memorizing the presidents of the United States or memorizing all the wars that were fought from 1600 to 2000. You want to focus on the concepts, the whys behind things, how they connect, causation, contextualization, right? Those skills are really important. Now, that also reduces the need for memorization, right? If you focus on the whys, you don't need to memorize as much. And it's going to really help when you get those documents, when you get those questions that require you to really think about why things are happening. Now, you want to make sure that as you're going through that, you're able to get highly specific, right? That you're able to recognize, see a document and recognize, oh my God, this is talking about the Compromise of 1876. Or, oh, this document is talking about FDR's decision to pack the courts, right? So sometimes that's very general. Sometimes, though, it's going to be more abstract. Sometimes it's very specific. Sometimes, though, it's going to be more abstract, more general. It's going to be about, oh, this really connects to the populism school of thought, right? And, that existed from, in the 18 to early 1900s. And again, sort of connecting to those bigger ideas, the bigger viewpoints, all of those particular topics, but understanding that there is a link, from that general material to the specific material, understanding the links between those concepts and application. Now, my personal favorite thing to do when I was studying, and when all my students were studying, student would come in, they'd say, they'd ask a question or they'd make a statement, and my favorite thing to say was always why. That was by far my favorite word. It got to a point where I would just, they'd ask a question or they'd say something, and I'd just look at them and they'd go, you want me to tell you why? I'd be like, yep, I do. Always play the why game. Why is something happening? Why is this important? Go through all those question words: who, what, when, where, why, and how, right? So all of them are useful, why and how especially. Now, practicing. When you want to practice with what's real, right? You don't want to just sort of speak or reread your textbook over and over again. You want to work with the format, the question types, the order, the timing. Practice like it's the real thing, right? Again, we talked before about being under time conditions. Again, so you get a sense of that anxiety, right? When you get into the actual test, you're gonna have a little anxiety, you're gonna have a little nervousness. If you're practicing under those test-like conditions, timed, getting it graded, you're going to have that nerves, that anxiety. You're going to be able to sort of work with it, practice with it, get acclimated to it. So when it comes time for the test, you're not only prepared, intellectually, but you're prepared mentally and emotionally. And regardless, if you are doing practice questions, if you are doing practice tests, try your best. Treat it like it's the real exam, right? Practice as you would play, because it's not that practice makes perfect, right? It's perfect practice makes perfect. So if you're not practicing perfectly, if you're not practicing all the ways that you would actually want to use on the test itself, it's not going to be as effective. Now, the best way of doing that is make sure you're being active and not passive as you're studying, right? Most students, when they study, at least from my experience with a lot of students, they come to me, okay, what did you do? Well, I read the textbook, or I read the notes. It's great, it's lovely. It's not effective. It's passive, right? You're just trying to soak up information and hoping that it sticks. Now, ironically, the part of your brain that controls your memory is in the exact opposite side of your brain as the part of your brain that controls your sight, right? The occipital lobe's in the back of your brain, your memory is in the front. So sight, not so great. So do things. Take your own notes, use your motor skills, speak, say things out loud, right? Talk to try to teach it to your friend or to a parent, because again, the way you know something is if you can teach it. I know for a fact my knowledge of all these topics, of history, of English, of grammar, became so much better when I started teaching, when I started having to explain it to students and, refine and coalesce the ideas, than when I could just do them myself. So, sit there, explain to somebody, summarize, make flashcards, take a quiz, have someone else give you a pop quiz, say, hey, maybe go to one of your teachers, study hours, after hours, office hours, whatever it is that they want to call them, and say, hey, Mr. or Mrs., whatever their name is, mind giving me like a quick, 10-question quiz, just a verbal quiz, maybe play some Jeopardy, right? I used to love playing topic Jeopardy with my students. I just, make up a Jeopardy board, and, they'd pick a money, and I'd make up a question. They'd have to answer it, Make sure you do that. Take quizzes. Don't just read. Don't just look at old material and expect that it's going to magically get better. Make sure you're doing. Make sure you're activating as many of those senses, speak, listening, touch, right? Feel. I don't know how you could get smell or taste in there, but if you find a way, go for it. Activate as many of those senses as possible so you are active and not passive. And again, if you're still struggling, if you still need help, if you're still confused, feel free, come to us. Give us a call. We have a lot of great teachers. All of our teachers are required to pass, an AP exam, get the equivalent of a 5 on it, so they all know, all of them, they're all phenomenal teachers. A lot of senators have a lot of experience, not just in terms of organizing, plan, a structure for you, sort of, but also just really, helping you with the whole process. So if at any point of time you would like more information, you'd like to be contacted, either you have additional questions or you'd like to meet with the center director and get either more information or get some help with the APs or really any other topic, let us know. So at the end of this, in order to let us know, at the end of this, there will be a quick survey that's going to pop up once the webinar is closed out. It's going to ask for your name, contact information, and a zip code. The zip code is critical so that we can make sure that we connect you with the C2 closest to you, right? I don't want to connect people who live in California with C2s that are all the way in New Jersey. So make sure that if you do that, leave your name, your number, or a way to contact you, whether it be your number or an email address, and your zip code. Thank you so much for listening to me. I hope you all had a wonderful time. I hope you learned a lot. For every student who is taking the exams, good luck. I wish you all the best. Thank you so much for listening to me, and I hope each and every one of you have a wonderful night. Thank you.